Welcome back to the show. So, I got a couple of questions. Is your business barely alive? Are you facing the hard truth on why your business has stalled out? In today's episode, we're going to talk about the brutal truth about why your business isn't growing. Let's get into it. Are you marketing effectively? You know, one of the things that was really difficult for me was making that transition to really asking myself that hard question. Do I even really have an online presence that people can find? And is my website outdated? Do I even have a social media presence? And if you're nowhere to be found when people are searching for the very thing that you do, that's a problem. If you're not accessing your market for people who are actually looking for you, and if that's the method they choose, because maybe they're not word of mouth people, maybe they don't billboard people, whatever it is that you've done in the past to, get the word out there about what you do and the business that you are bringing to your customers, then you really have to ask yourself that question about why aren't I, looking into other things? Are you finding your ideal customer? I mean, you can't be that thing to everyone. It's easy to think about from a standpoint of, my product or service is really good, great, my customers love it. But if you're not finding the ideal customer, right? If you haven't pinpointed who that customer is that's going to be able to benefit from what you do, then you need to really think long and hard about who you want to be doing business with. Do you want to do business with the customer that kind of needs you, or do you want to find the customer that really needs you? I would say that in my experience, in asking myself that question and going through that process, it's the latter. I want to find the customers that I do the best with, because those are the customers that are going to refer business. Those are the customers that are going to stay with me, and they actually appreciate what I'm bringing to the table. There may be the other customers that go with you because they kind of like your service, they kind of like your product. Well, they're probably not going to be long-term customers, and they're going to be the ones that aren't going to sit there and refer you, or the conversation isn't going to come up when they come across someone that, hey, you need to do business with this guy or this gal because they're the best. The other thing that was really hard for me to realize was I really giving a clear call to action? In anything that I was marketing, was I actually asking for the sale in the marketing? We've talked about this in previous episodes that you have to ask, right? Your customer needs to understand, what they need to do. If you're not clearly asking, I mean, it could be as simple as, if you want to make the purchase, click here. Maybe it's as simple as, do you want a quote? Click here. Let me know. These are simple things that sometimes are not clear because we get so hung up on our messaging that we're ignoring the simple thing of just asking for the sale or asking the customer to do something. Recently, as far as like maybe a year ago, I was thinking about, am I providing the value that the customer wants? And sometimes we think in our own minds as entrepreneurs and business owners that we know what the customer wants. We don't necessarily, do that purposefully because we just don't want to listen. But I think it's something that just happens inherently because you're always coming up with the ideas you're so passionate about. And guess what? If it's not growing or people aren't buying, then you're probably not offering the very thing that people are looking for. So some of the things that you have to face up to, and it's really difficult sometimes, is you just need to reevaluate your offering. And you can't get butthurt about it. You can't look back and go, man, why does nobody like my idea or nobody like my service offerings? It's so great. Well, maybe you think it's great, but if your customers aren't buying, then it's probably time to reevaluate and make a readjustment. And don't take it so personal. That was one of the things that I think in a lot of my personal growth this last year was that I stopped taking things so personally. If somebody doesn't like something, it's okay. It's just information, and you take it, you do whatever you need to make your readjustment, and then you move on. It's really that simple. But I think when you really get attached to something, you do tend to take it personally. I mean, I know I did, and that was one of the things that I had to work on because in the big picture, you're looking to grow your business and keep moving forward, and you're not really worried about whether or not your feelings are hurt or not. Customer experience. This goes back to maybe what I came up with wasn't something that the customer wanted. And a lot of times, I think we get into this, it would be so much better if the customer did things this way, or this is why, we service our customers in that way. And what ends up happening is the customer gets dissatisfied because you're again focusing on what you think they want instead of listening to what they really want. And if you can understand that sometimes, again, I'm just going to say it one more time. If you don't take things personal, and just because you come up with an idea that you think is going to be more better for the customer, if it's not, then it's really not worth repeating. And if you're not going to take the time to really evaluate that and look at that and not take things personally, then that's going to be a big problem because nobody's going to want to do business with you because you're not focusing on the thing that they actually want. Innovation. Everybody is talking about AI, technology. I mean, it seems like every single time I'm on looking online or Instagram or LinkedIn or getting some newsletter, it's always talking about the newest, latest, and greatest thing. And I think that if we're not careful, sometimes we get very set in our own ways. And I know I've done this before, and I'm not willing to just get outside of my comfort zone and see how these new technologies can be applicable to the very thing that I want to be doing. And if I'm not willing to do this, then I'm not really getting myself poised, right, for the next stage of growth. And it's a hard conversation that you have to have with yourself because it's a lot of work to constantly be adapting. But that is the world that we live in. It goes very, very fast. Technology is just on a record pace. If you're not going to jump on that train, you're going to get left behind. So people have to make that decision. You have to make that decision on whether or not you want to get left behind, which ultimately is going to just do the very thing where your business will stall out. It'll continue to just kind of coast along. Maybe you stay profitable, maybe you don't, which is a really bad scenario, obviously. But I bring that up because I think someone needs to say it. So if you're not willing to put in the work and explore new ideas, new technologies, and see how that's going to fit within the way that you do business, that's going to be a problem. Then you might as well just hang it up because I'm telling you that if you don't start paying attention to how these things are going to go, right, and the direction that they're going in, then you're going to have a real problem with your business and you're going to have a real problem with growth. One of the key pieces that really brings all of this together in your business is leading effectively. Are you leading effectively? So knowing that so many things are happening at a much faster pace, are you trying to do everything yourself? I think I find myself being a little bit more control. I think if it's something that, as entrepreneurs, it's your baby, you started it, you want it done a certain way, and you feel that the only way to get that done is if you do it yourself. Big mistake. I've done that. I've been there. I've done that. And I find myself, going back to that, especially when, things are going really fast and I don't know what's going on. I just want to get back into control. I want to control something and do it myself because, I believe that's the only way to get it done. And it just makes me feel better. But all that really does is just soaks up your time and it doesn't allow you to focus on the big picture. And if you're not willing to delegate to your team, then all you're doing is just pigeonholing yourself into only being this productive. You're not going to be very productive. And in the end, all you're going to do is alienate your team and basically tell them that they can just dump everything on your lap because they really don't know what they're really supposed to be doing if you don't have that confidence and you're just constantly afraid to delegate. You want to hire talented people. You want to be able to develop them. You want to be able to trust them and empower them and allow them to do the very thing that you hired them to do. So the second part of this is, do you have a clear vision? If you can't see your own vision clearly, how do you expect anybody else to? And that's a huge problem if you haven't really sat and define that very well for yourself to understand. And then you got to explain it, right? So, number one, you have to get yourself in that mindset of where you think through what that vision is. I like to say it out loud. I like to see it down on paper. I like to think through it. I'll oftentimes, talk with my wife and business partner and just going through that process. And I just want to hear, that initial feedback so we can kind of hash some of these things out so I can get a clearer picture of the way that I want to deliver it to the team because I want them to understand it, no pun intended, clearly. So a clear vision is what's going to get you to that next level. Because if you don't see it, they're not going to see it. And the last thing I want to talk about is resistance to change. I used to think when I was younger that I was a really good change agent. That was something that when I took one of those personality profiles when I was working for this large company, they would ask, or point out whether or not, you were a change agent. That was like the terminology, or can you adapt to change very well? And I think that, as you get older or you get more experienced and you get more set in your ways because you're used to doing things and you don't like all of this new information that's constantly coming out on, ways that you can do something differently. I mean, it seems like if I was to just look at whatever online social platform or YouTube or just scroll, that I'm going to consume so much information about so many different things that it does tend to get overwhelming. And a lot of times that gets cluttered in your mind and you just become stagnant. It's almost like you can't move, but it's so important to quiet your mind, get out of that environment, and really think about some of the new ideas that you're being exposed to, or people are telling you, or you're researching on your own, and then being able to embrace it because you do have a quiet mind at that very moment to be able to evaluate and see, how this is really going to work within what you're doing in your own business, and how are you going to effectively take your idea and execute it, not only yourself, but with your team, so you can stay relevant in this fast-paced world. So I highly encourage you to just take a moment and take a breath and think about what we talked about in this episode, because you know that it's coming. Whether we like it or not, change is coming. If you found this episode helpful, share it with someone who needs to hear it. I always encourage you to subscribe. And if you have a moment, rate the show. You can find us on YouTube at HeyCharles Biz, Apple Podcasts and Spotify at HeyCharles, HeyCharles77 on Instagram, and Charles Ernst on LinkedIn. See you next time.